Good afternoon, everybody. My name is LuigiDini, and I am here for Console to Console podcast with my very special guest, Andy Games _94. Today, we are talking everything and anything about WWF Warzone, one of the elite and premier games from the day of wrestling and WWE, WWF under that umbrella. Andy, welcome in, sir. I am happy to have you today, my friend.
Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to just chatting this game with you. It's definitely one of the hidden gems of the late 90s, so it's definitely going to be good to delve into that a bit, man.
For sure, and like you said, it is a hidden gem of the of the wrestling video game umbrella. Obviously, from back in the day, it was on plenty of platforms, and does have some accolades for sure. Was a finalist of the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences for the Console Fighting Gamer of the Year, which was actually won by WCW NWO Revenge, and then was also a finalist for CNET Game Center Best Mario 6 or Best Nintendo 64 game of 1998, which was ended up winning Zelda Ocarina of Time. So was a big nominated game back in the day. We're here to discuss it all, sir, and no better man than you to do us the honor.
I'll certainly do my best anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Andy, first question, as always, as a pioneer of the wrestling video games under your Acclaim Entertainment, WWF Warzone, can you bring us through your earliest memories of playing this game and why it is was so special and is so special to you?
Yeah, so I couldn't even tell you exactly what it was, but just to take you way back to the very beginning, whenever like I was a young kid, me and my older brothers we shared a Nintendo 64, and I think it was my oldest brother had gotten this game on the N64, and it was just like to me it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Now I was kind of like must have only been maybe 4 or 5 at the time or something like that, so I didn't really know too much about like wrestling itself, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as any kid like you love watching like just sort of fighting and stuff like that. It's kind of
Oh,
just
yeah.
an exhilarating thing to watch, you know. And I literally was just like nothing I'd ever seen before, so I just kind of really enjoyed playing it, creating like new characters and kind of going through the championship mode,
Yep.
but making the characters as like ridiculous as possible, just because
Yeah.
at the time it was just entertaining. Um, and then like sort of the older I got, I sort of like just started playing it like more and properly and really kind of focusing on things like the attributes. And as I kind of got properly into wrestling as
Yep.
well, kind of had it like a side by side thing. And it was like, okay, I started to understand it a little bit more, know how to play the game rather than just do the same like 5 buttons kind of thing.
Right.
And for me as well, I think for being such like a simplistic game, like there's really not much to it, but it really was just like I don't know, man. It just was the iconic wrestling game. I think for
Yeah.
me personally, anyway.
Absolutely. And, throughout that game, you had all the names of names. Like, I know here at Console to Console, we talk Mount Rushmores all the time. Even before we went live here, we chatted about your favorite games, which that'll be up soon on the platforms. But, you know, the Mount Rushmore of wrestling was in this game. You had The Rock, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, you had Shawn
Yeah,
Michaels, you had The Undertaker. Like, literally everybody from the greatest golden era, which was the Attitude Era of wrestling, was prominent in this game, which is crazy because of the older games. It was, you play with your favorite wrestler, or what you said, you create your own
yeah,
wrestlers, which were either you would build yourself, or would you build the most extravagant weird thing and just fight your favorites of all time, you know? So
yeah. Oh, 100%. Like for me, it was either the most muscle bound person you could think of, or a super heavyweight. Basically, like imagine Rikishi.
yeah.
Like that was the sort of only thing I was going for. But like just as like a sort of side note as well, I remember one thing that really kind of like gauged me into this when I was younger was I was over at a friend's house with my brother at the time, and they had it on the PS1, and I
Mm-hmm.
was just like, oh my god, like this was like mind blowing to me. I didn't realize that it was out on multiple platforms.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that that was even a thing,
Mm-hmm.
and like, but then I also noticed that he had all of the women unlocked as well,
Yep.
which again was like a total. I need to get this. I
Yeah.
need to get this for myself. And spoiler, I never did,
Yeah.
even to this day. But it's probably a patience thing at this point.
Gotcha. Um, yeah. So just going into it a little bit more, if you could take the viewer on a tour of what WWF Warzone, has to offer, talk to us a little bit about the gameplay, the game modes, and things of that sort.
Yeah. So it's safe to say that wrestling games have come a long, long way
Mm-hmm.
since then. Like over the last 25 years plus, like really the amount that's gone into them is kind of crazy. So you have your sort of championship mode, which takes you through like a essentially like a pyramid of matches. So I think this goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yep.
So what's that? 15 matches or something? I think that you have at the
Right.
very least. In your third last, you'll get the Intercontinental title, and then the very top of the hill is the WWE or WWF Championship
Yep.
at the time.
We're allowed to say it with this
Um,
one. For this game, we're
that's
allowed
it.
to
We
say
are.
it.
We are. Say it. But then within that, as you're kind of going up, climbing up the ladder, what'll happen is you'll have old sort of rivals coming back for grudge matches, which will either be a normal match, a weapons match, or a cage match.
Yep.
And then yeah, the weapons matches were always an absolute like they were always a cinch. You just literally found a chair,
Yeah.
hit them twice with it, then the crowd would throw another chair in, and
Yep.
you had the TV and everything. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, like it was just awesome. And then you have like your training mode as well. Your training mode again, just learning the controls because it was I don't know, like for anybody who has never played like a WWE game, like the controls now are like incredibly simple.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like back then it was just incredibly strange, especially like on the N64. You were talking like using the D-pad, pressing like the C buttons and the A and B at the same time, like a lot of weird combinations, and especially with the finishers as well. Like it was a lot to remember. I so like even whenever I was younger, all I did was just kind of like I went into the training mode simply to unlock the trainer as a wrestler,
Mm.
and then that was it.
Okay.
And then after that, literally, I just was mashing buttons, learning the basics. So then after that, you had like all your other match types. You had tag team, you have cage match, weapons match, and then Royal Rumble,
Yep.
which was like the Royal Rumble was always quite an interesting one for me personally as well, because I always like to see how far I could get in a Royal Rumble without
Yeah.
actually knowing how to play the game at the time. And so what I used to do was I used to sort of find any wrestler, and it was usually Steve Austin,
Yep.
usually Stone Cold Steve Austin.
The cover athlete of the
Um,
game, of course.
oh yeah, absolutely. But the main reason for that was because one of his moves was a back body trap,
Mm-hmm.
and for those who don't know what that is, literally you would throw your opponent into the ropes, and as they're coming back, you would like bend over and you would flip them over, like yeah, you would just sort of flip them over your back. Um, you would be able to, if you were close enough to the ropes, you'd be able to do that over the ropes and eliminate them from the rumble. And basically, because I didn't really know how to do eliminations properly, my plan was let's see how many people I can whip into the ropes and back body drop off out of the ring.
There we go. That's one strategy.
Did it ever really work? No. I had to. That's one thing I had to actually learn how to
Yeah.
do, which kind of sucked. And then when you think you get anything for winning the Rumble, it just becomes one of the stats of one of the wrestlers.
Yes, indeed, it does. Yeah, and like one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later when we start comparing like this amazing game to the other games of its era is the game engine itself and the controls. One of the game modes I thoroughly enjoyed with this game was actually the most simple mode of the entire game, and it's barely even a mode. It was, if you scroll a little bit down, it was the biographies section. Because like what I feel like with this game, what was so special about it was one of the first wrestling games that actually had attributes. It actually had like rankings, which now if anyone out there, and you of course I know you play it, but anyone has played WWE 2K24, ratings with these wrestlers is so prominent in these games. Like, Roman Reigns is a 99, Cody Rhodes is a 95, whatever it is. But like back in the day, it wasn't a prominent feature in wrestling games. This was like one of the first games that actually had like a semi-tier system and a semi-ranking system to wrestling video games. So that was just one of my favorites. And then along with like, as you scroll through the wrestlers, like their entrance music was there too, where they're from. You saw Mankind was from quote unquote parts unknown, so you had like the funny little things in there.
From the Boiler Room.
The Boiler Room, yes.
Was he from the Boiler Room? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and then Kane was parts unknown. But like things of that sort. Like the biographies mode was always like a special near and dear one to my heart that I always thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Oh yeah, no, same. I definitely spent a time or two in the biographies, especially because you were able to flip between like the different gear that the wrestlers wore as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes they wore different trunks, and take Steve Austin for example. You could get him wearing his vest in some matches as well. I never figured out how to do that though. There's definitely a way to do that, but I never figured out how to actually do that whenever you're going on to play the matches.
Yeah, that's one thing I never figured out either. I was always, whenever I played Warzone, I was always The Rock, and he would come out. It was so weird because it was that in-between era of wrestling where The Rock was like part of the Nation of Domination, but also was just The Rock as well. Yeah. So like they were calling him Rocky Maivia, but he was The Rock, and he had like The Rock trunks on, and that's my boy. So like that's who I always went with, and he just always came out in his trunks, boots, and did his thing.
Yeah, and like that to me is what one of the more interesting parts of that game was, because it was on the cusp of like Attitude Era.
Yeah,
just on the very, very cusp. Like obviously, like HBK and Triple H, they're still DXing it.
Yep.
But this was like pre, Invasion.
Yeah.
The Monday Night Wars, Attitude Era, everything. It was just on the cusp. So that's why it was like so interesting, because there wasn't really much to kind of go off. Because in terms of WWE, it was just what it was. Yeah. There was nothing noteworthy. Well, probably was noteworthy stuff about it, to be honest. But at the same time, going on, but like, you didn't have that kind of gimmick. You didn't have that sort of era thing. Like say, The Rock was in Nation of Domination.
Yep.
But they didn't really do anything with like the stables. I mean, I don't know what much they could have done at the time, but you just knew that you had Ahmed Johnson, Farouk, and The Rock.
Yeah.
They were the NOD members.
Yeah.
At the time, and but yeah, it was very much a sort of singles-based game. I think
definitely.
In that aspect.
And that kind of like, that's actually a good lead in to like what we were going to talk about next is, I'd be definitely slighting our convo and our audience if we didn't mention the other side of the fence of wrestling games of that time period. In the same breath as Warzone, which was a THQ Publishing, the likes of THQ Publishing actually had WrestleMania 2000 and then WWF No Mercy, which those two are very, very prominent when it came to the Nintendo 64 console itself, which both of those, kind of off what you said, they did have stables in those. They did have managers types in those. So, just in your eyes, give me like your honest comparison, because obviously it was WWF Warzone, and the predecessor to that was WWF Attitude, and then that game engine was actually used later on in ECW Anarchy, which, not to slight it, but wasn't the most popular of the wrestling video games. But just give me an honest opinion on, like, what Acclaim Entertainment had, and then obviously what THQ brought to the table when it came to wrestling games.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so I remember when I bought No Mercy. So I bought WrestleMania 2000, and I bought No Mercy around the same time. This was about maybe 5 years ago. I was collecting N64 games at the time. Like, it was just the start of COVID, and I was working from home, and I didn't really. I couldn't go out, couldn't spend money, so I ended up saving a lot of money. Started collecting Nintendo games, and they were part of, because of how much I really liked playing Warzone. I wanted to kind of branch out and see what the other ones were like as well. So I started playing No Mercy first, and it was one of those things I very much struggled to get. Now, I would have to go back to it, but I did struggle initially to get into it, and it was, for me, it was because, like, it felt very much the same as Warzone in some aspects. Gameplay, not so much. Like, obviously, like, I definitely think it was still a step above. Same with WrestleMania 2000, but I think it had the same pause menu, the same controls menu, and stuff like that. And that was kind of a thing. Like, I immediately was just like, well, I'm just playing the same game here.
Right.
So again, it's something I definitely would have to go back to for sure. But my initial thoughts were, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But excuse me. But that being said, like, again, I still think it's definitely, like, from what I did see, definitely was a step up. It was definitely one of those things that was like, okay, I could put, like, some time into this, and I could really kind of, get a lot more out of this. I didn't, because I am kind of a bit bad at keeping track of games played and when to go back to them. Like, definitely would call that an attention span thing. But I think after this conversation, there is a higher likelihood of me going back to play No Mercy after this, for sure. WrestleMania 2000, I definitely played that, like, a bit more.
Yeah.
The story mode of that alone was just really, really good. Like, and I kind of think the visuals in it as well were just amazing. Like, the fact that you had, like, proper cutscenes, you had dialogue. It seemed to be like a sort of more evolved game.
Yeah.
In terms of that, and, like, I just really, really enjoyed it. And obviously, like, the basis of the story is getting to WrestleMania. Like, it was like the big WrestleMania, like the turn of the century, and that was the story. And you had obviously all these different obstacles getting in your way, but, like, and I think the fact remains kind of true even going to this day, where, like, everything, every sort of game, in terms of these, like, wrestling ones, are an improvement on the next one.
Sure.
But obviously, I think in more recent years, it's definitely something that's, like, slowed down a little bit, because there's only so much you can update a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, in terms of, like, 2K24 to 2K25, I've not seen anything in terms of what's going to be involved with 2K25, but I don't know what much more they could do based on the last few games, apart from update the roster and certain things like that now. But when you do go back to the games of, like, the late 90s into the early 2000s and so on, like, you find that the improvements and developments are, like, a lot sort of further on.
Definitely.
And I suppose that kind of applies to, like, all different types of games. Like, like, for example, when you chatted to Freeman the other week talking about FIFA, same sort of idea. Like, the improvements kind of were huge in, like, the earlier editions, but
right.
Like, that they're not improving because they are.
Correct. Yeah, and it's to what you're talking about. It's the earlier stages, you saw those significant jumps. Like, you're talking about WrestleMania 2000 earlier, and, I feel like with at least Mania 2000, like, they followed the blueprint of what WWF was doing at the time. Like, the story was very on brand with what they were doing. Because during that time, I believe getting to WrestleMania in 2000, the main event was, I think it was The Rock versus Triple H versus Mick Foley versus Big Show.
I think so, yeah.
I think that's what the thing was. But in the story mode, that's kind of what ends up happening along the way. But then there's a curveball at the end, and like all of a sudden you're fighting Andre the Giant to finish off story mode. And it's like, it's for like the true wrestling fan, it was a very nice treat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like all wrestling games do have that uniqueness about them. I think one of the massive differences, and like this is where I thoroughly, kind of what we chatted about earlier, I thoroughly enjoyed with WWF Warzone, was that rating system. But with WrestleMania 2000, it wasn't that. Like, you pretty much had Stone Cold Steve Austin being the same rated wrestler as Jeff Jarrett, as Midian, as China. Which, it's like, okay, so I can be Stephanie McMahon and I can beat Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF title.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so like that's where it was like with Warzone. I really think it was like that small thing, really realistic wise. Now looking back at it, now that we're a little bit older in our lives, it's like, okay, I wish they did that differently.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I think like the rankings and all the attributes and everything, like from Warzone, like it was very apparent in the gameplay too. But like what I found interesting was you had like sort of, it was done like, I don't know if you remember, but it was done in like sort of it's like a bar system essentially. So you had like this like chain link, and it went up to say 10 for talk's sake, right?
Yep.
But every single wrestler had the exact same number, except it was divided differently into different attributes. So some had like more aggression, some had better aerial, things like that, etc. Sure. But like it kind of balanced out, but you kind of noticed that like if you were playing the CPU on like hard mode, you might have noticed that particular wrestlers, like say the Hart brothers, would have went into like submissions a bit more, because that's what their attributes were kind of, so like it was noticeable, definitely for sure. But then like I think it's so weird because like they seem to like get rid of it for a little bit and then bring it back.
Yeah.
I think kind of now I think now evident than ever, because I was playing 2K24 today, and I was doing like the universe mode, and I was my own created wrestler, and I was in a feud with Dominic Mysterio for the Intercontinental Championship, and it was one of those ones where you could tell like based on like my win-loss ratio, my rating's like 95 in the universe mode or something like that, but poor Dom is ranked like 81. So it's the sort of thing like he can barely get a hit off, he can barely kick out of anything. Whereas then I go on to then wrestle Cody Rhodes after, and then we're having these like 25-minute matches because even if I hit him with 3 finishers in a row or a super finisher, he's still kicking out of it because of his ranking. It just, but like back in the older days, in the days of Warzone, like for Warzone, is that you had to get them into the red. That was the sort of like guarantee. You get their health bar to the red, then they're not kicking out at all. Maybe a deep orange, and you might get them, but that's the height of it. So it's sort of the criteria for it. The RNG has changed
the big time
over the years. They've evolved that for sure. That was quite an interesting thing. The fact that it's like you just have to get them into the red first, and then it's just who pins who.
Yeah, right. It's like who tires the other one out more, and then hit the finisher for, for the sake of hitting the
Yeah.
finisher, and then it's over. You know, a rock bottom or a stunner.
Remember,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
if you can like play sort of Twister with your fingers on the controller to try and get the buttons, I don't know, man. I struggled. Man.
yeah. No, and like I think with War, it was definitely easier with the game engine at least. It was definitely easier to hit the finishers and all that in WrestleMania No Mercy, but like I think that's why like with Warzone it was a little bit more like realistic because it was harder to land the final move, you know.
Oh,
So
for sure.
I think you know, at least when it comes to finishers and like the game engine itself, like it was definitely good to see they made you work for you to hit the moves you wanted to hit, you know. It's not just
Oh yeah, for
pressing,
sure.
it's not just getting a grapple and then flicking the toggle, you know. But
Oh yeah, because they made it really hard to like hit your finisher, sort of mid match.
yeah,
Like, say you've got your opponent under the red, that's when you can hit your finisher as well. But you're trying to do this combo on your controller, but the CPU isn't stopping. They're still throwing digs at you. They're still throwing kicks at you. They're still trying to hit you with a body slam, for example. So it depends on sort of like, so for me personally, is like whenever I play games like that, I like to sort of like let my imagination take over. Let my imagination, so try and immerse myself into the game. But also make it like, in terms of doing that, like make it as realistic as possible, so it's more lifelike to what I would watch on TV. So you finish a match with your finisher. But the thing is, the problem with these games is that, like, if you get your opponent health bar down to the red, you can hit them with a drop kick, and as long as they're stunned,
yep,
you can pin them.
that's
Right?
it.
What kind of ending is that to a match?
Super
What I mean?
anticlimactic.
Yeah, exactly. So it was one of those things where what I used to do was I used to like get them into the red, get them stunned, pick them up, and I would like time it. So I would start doing like the movement or the combination for the finisher
Right.
just as their stun is about to run out, and then hit it as soon as their health bar comes back
Yeah.
up. So I could hit them with the finisher, whether it be a choke slam, whatever
Yep.
it might have been. So then they get stunned again, and I finish the match with the finisher.
Oh,
Just, I don't know. I don't know why I had it in my head like those. I was very, very anal about doing
no,
that.
I was the same way. Like if my matches didn't end with the people's elbow or the rock bottom, I didn't want the match to end. I'm the
Yeah,
same way, buddy.
100%. Yeah, otherwise it's just yeah, because I mean there were times where I didn't really care about it. So like what I tried to do sometimes was I tried to like challenge myself to see if it was physically possible to score a pinfall whenever the audience is in favor of your opponent. So whenever they're
Okay.
chanting the opponent's name, you get them into stun, right? And their stun bar goes down so fast, they get up so
Yep.
quick. So you're kind of just thinking, right, okay, I wonder, is this possible? And I think it is, but you have to really get them to the deepest red in terms of their
Gotta
stun
work
bar.
for it.
That or a count out,
Yep.
which I've definitely done a lot of times before. Because like there were times when I don't know why. I don't know why I would do this, but like I would start a championship, new championship mode
Mhm.
with probably a created character, and then I'd immediately be like, nah, I can't be bothered. Or maybe it's against a particular wrestler or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like there would be times where I'm just like, I really can't be bothered doing this. So what I then end up doing is I'll immediately climb out of the ring,
Yep.
run around the ring,
Done this
then
too.
let them chase me, and then I will just literally, once it hits 7, I will just start pummeling them, absolutely like just absolute ground and pound body slams onto the floor till their stun bar comes up, get back in the ring for 9 and then 10.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, on hindsight, like that's probably a speedrun tactic if there
I'm
if
sure
there
it
ever
is.
was one.
I'm sure it
But
is.
yeah, it's not something I ever knew about. It was more just it's like I can't be bothered
Yeah, no,
going to
certain
like
people certain wrestlers you just didn't want to wrestle against, and certain ones you
yeah.
I think it was part of it with like championship mode and all that, and like with the story modes as like, you know, the other games started to come out was you kind of wanted to find out what was coming next, and like we kind of slided ourselves in the moment of it's like, okay, I want to get past this. I want to see what happens next week. I want to get past this, see what happens next week. So like, just using The Rock as the example, I'd be The Rock. I'd be facing like, I don't know, the Brooklyn Brawler or the British Bulldog or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Throw him out of the ring, grab, like you said, a chair, beat him down, because in some of those like weeks, it'd be no DQ, so you can just beat him down with the chair, and then at 9 you just hop in the ring and you're good. Like that's,
Yeah.
and then like you're on to next week and you see what happens next in the story. So like I get it, I fully get it.
Yeah. Although one thing I did learn about that though, for Warzone, is that if you want to get through the matches quicker, put the time limit down to 5 minutes. So like it's defaulted at 15. If you
Yep.
change it down to 5, then within like a minute you could literally get them under the red.
I did not know that. Wish I knew it, but I did not know that.
Oh man, I rinsed through all the settings just whenever I was younger. Like I
Love it.
Seen that game inside and out. Like
Too funny. So Andy, now that we took it a little deeper dive into the game, as obviously an international content creator on TikTok, Twitch, and you're also an amazing podcast host yourself with Behind the Camera podcast. Please check that out in all the platforms as well. This game, as opposed to my guest prior to me, this has not been a game as part of your variety rotation.
Yeah.
You're well known for your amazing, Mario 64 randomizer play, along with content that, your audience loves you for. But is there a specific reason why it's not part of the rotation? And with that, like, being so special to you, why you haven't shared it with your, crew?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to like whenever I got into streaming because of Mario 64 speedrunning, and that was the sort of like attitude that I took going into it. So when I started streaming, it was going to be like this is what it's going to be. It's going to be Mario 64 speedrunning, and then one day a week I'll do like a bit of variety. Now that's not to say that could have fell into that in the original plan, but it never did. But then that plan never really stuck more than a few weeks. Put too much time into it, and then I think it got to the point where, for me personally, I kind of felt that I was like, it's like, oh, this is me. This is me as a streamer. This is how I'm known. So this is what I'm gonna do. And obviously that's kind of changed more recently, but part of me does also think that certain games like this, you just need to keep to yourself. You just need to kind of keep like these little sort of like these little hidden gems that you really enjoy.
Yeah.
Just keep it to yourself. And it could just be a case where it might not resonate the same way with other people, or you just don't feel like you need to in some aspects.
True.
Now, to be fair, that being said, like wrestling is and always has been a very sort of divisive like topic of conversation for some people, because you, though there's the whole thing, like you look at us, for example, two guys in our 30s, and people are just like, well, you guys are in your 30s and you like wrestling, like, grow up. It's like, well, no, I happen to be a fan of athleticism. I happen to be a fan of storytelling. I happen to be a fan of particular art forms. This, that, and the other, right? And just I happen to enjoy it, so get off my back, right?
Of course.
So there's always that kind of thing. But the problem is that people do kind of take that attitude and be like, well, I never liked wrestling. So, and if someone never liked it when they were younger, chances are they probably won't like it. Because I kind of think that people, whenever people do get older, and they still like wrestling, is because they did when they were younger. And it's like kind of they brought back in this like, so I know so many people who like wrestling now, and they had like a massive gap where they didn't watch it or didn't know what was going on, but they kind of, it's like a sort of nice sort of return to like what things were like when they were younger. Ever audience, I don't know, but that's something that maybe might sort of happen in the near future based off the back of this conversation. I
You
don't
never
know,
know.
but I think mainly it's just because it's like a sort of thing where sometimes you just have to keep
Yeah.
your own little sort of hidden gems to yourself sometimes. But again, like as the old cliche, especially in the wrestling world, goes, never say never.
Never say never. Love it. Love it. Yeah, just obviously relating to you, it's like it's kind of that this game for you. It seems like it's one of your hidden gems. That's like
Yeah,
me with Super Mario RPG. It's
yeah,
I initially when I started streaming things of that sort on Twitch a couple years ago, like that was like a game I played once through over a couple days with like my cousins watching things of that sort. But although everyone you know surrounded by me knows I love it, I never really stream it. I
yeah.
play it still a ton, especially with like the remake on Nintendo Switch, things of that sort, the remaster on Nintendo Switch, things like that. But like I can count on my hand how many times I've actually streamed it since
Yeah.
becoming, more into the streaming game. And I think it's just purely because it's like you said, it's one of those hidden gems that I hold near and dear to my heart. And it's also I know how much I appreciate it, but like
Yeah,
I don't know how to convey it to others why it's so special to me. Because there's so
of
many like
course.
little bits and pieces of that game that I just adore for certain reasons, but if you don't know it or play it, you won't appreciate it, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of think, and I think this is a sort of like a normal sort of streamer kind of thought as well. It's like, I suppose normal thought for a streamer, also just a thought generally that kind of occurs in life as well. But if you are really passionate about something and you really, really like something, there is like nothing sometimes more sort of disheartening that when you try to share that with people who you are close to, and you just don't get the same kind
Yeah.
of like reaction. Like you are so invested in something, you care about it a lot, you're really into it, and then like the first reaction you get from people are like, "Yeah, it's not for me." It's
Yeah.
it's like it's just and you know what? I mean, it's not by no means is that a bad thing because people like what they like, people don't like what they don't like, and that's totally fine. But when you really are into something, man, it feels like a knife to the heart sometimes. For real, like it's.
Oh,
I
it
think
hurts.
in the space of being like a streamer, it's kind of hard because then it's like you then sort of get into your own head and think, am I limiting myself in terms of what I can feel like I can do, what I feel like I can put out there, in terms of the things that I like? It's sort of a bit of a rabbit hole to go down,
Yeah,
I think. But yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I fully get it, fully understand, can totally relate. So Andy, we've obviously talked about WWF Warzone, talked a little bit about you. When we were initially chatting about you coming on, something that you brought to me was
yeah,
that the date of our live recording, which is today, is also the date of the 2025 Royal Rumble, which is tonight. Um,
yes, sir.
I would love if you could just give me some insight on two things. Who do you think will win tonight's 2025 Royal Rumble? And who do you want to win the Rumble?
So this is something that I have struggled to come up with an answer for because it's one of the things, it's just spider webs everywhere. So okay, you go back like say maybe 10 years, right? And the WrestleMania sort of feud storylines, they weren't written at that point. They weren't written by the Royal Rumble. They were dictated by the winner of the Royal Rumble, so it
Mm-hmm.
was always a bit of a shock.
Yep.
Then, of course, like with the sort of increase in prominence of dirt sheets and stuff, then it became a sort of thing. Well, it's like, oh well, such and such is returning, so they're probably going to win. And
Yep.
then this year's no exception. So we have John Cena being like the talk of the company at the moment, the talk of the industry.
The retirement tour is on, starting tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then this is where that mentality kind of flips as well. It's like, is that too obvious? Now sometimes you kind of do like you kind of do get that too obvious thing, and then they do go ahead with it. So like Cody Rhodes winning last year.
Yep.
Of course that was going to happen. Everyone knew, but it made sense.
Yeah.
And people were kind of into it because that was like the main storyline for the better part of a year anyway. But whereas like this year you're talking it's between maybe like 4 people, 5 people, maybe. But you've got like CM Punk, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, John Cena, and The Rock. Maybe Roman Reigns, but I can't really see that. I can see him being in the Final Four, but something else happening, him getting sort of trailed away for his WrestleMania story. So I kind of feel like it's going to be one of those. Now, each of them all have a big story behind them, but think back to 2018 when Shinsuke Nakamura won the Royal Rumble, seemingly out of absolutely nowhere.
One of the most exciting results because it was so unpredictable. Yes.
Exactly. And I don't really feel like there has been one such the same since. Nope. Like Drew McIntyre winning, that was one that kind of became a bit evident throughout the Rumble.
Yep.
Because people were thinking Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
But then it was Drew McIntyre. So that one, I suppose, was also. But yeah, I kind of feel like with all the WrestleMania programs seem to be like set in stone and already teased and hinted. It's like, I mean, I don't know, but I suppose now that they unpredict if WWE do something right, it's unpredictability at times. But anyway, like my tangent aside, who I think will win the Rumble, part of me kind of feels like I don't want to say John Cena.
You don't want to say it, but it's literally I honestly, if you're like, I think it's gonna happen.
I think so too. Now, the only reason I think this is because obviously the whole the background with CM Punk is main event in WrestleMania.
Right.
That's his thing, right? But he doesn't need to win the Royal Rumble to do that.
No.
So that's kind of like a sort of easy out for him. Seth Rollins, he's a lifer. He's a lifer. He's going to have many more titles. If he doesn't win the Royal Rumble this year, he'll go on to have a better program with other people throughout the rest of the year. John Cena, I think because they already hinted at it, it's maybe there's don't know, but even still, John Cena, I kind of think there's the whole kind of will he break Ric Flair's record at Mania, have his ultimate final WrestleMania moment. Kind of, it would be mad not to, but at the same time, do they want to pander? Like, do you see what I mean? In terms of,
it's a lot,
absolutely everywhere, So who I would want to win, like just to go back to the whole like Shinsuke thing, like I would want it to be somebody like I would want it to be like, somebody like LA Knight.
Yeah,
somebody
that'd be
you wouldn't
cool.
expect.
Yep.
But like I kind of think the problem with WWE right now is that they don't really have the. I don't want to say not the caliber of superstar that they did back in the day, but there was the whole image thing that Vince McMahon had kind of, sort of really put on WWE. That their top guys had to be really tall, jacked, just proper, kind of living in the 70s and 80s kind of thing. Um, but I think because that's carried on for so long, the problem now is that like it's not believable
Yes.
for somebody like Jey Uso, for example,
Right.
to have a world heavyweight title because no, disregard the fact that I personally don't really care for him and don't think he's that good as a singles
Yep.
competitor. It just doesn't look believable.
Right.
And the whole thing that started was 10 years ago, 11 years ago with Daniel Bryan and the Yes Movement
Yes.
because he didn't fit the image. He was trying to break the mold. It worked for him
Mm-hmm.
solely based on his work ethic alone, but in terms of like it's like it's hard to kind of get out of that mindset in terms of image. So it's kind of like who do you know like I'd love to see someone like Sheamus win the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
Sheamus,
Super
LA Knight,
random and yeah.
somebody mid card, you know. But yeah, like it's I could go on all day,
No. Yeah. No. And
but
that's
I
like
definitely think it's like it's hard to really like say somebody and believe
yeah.
because of that whole mindset that's been really kind of pumped into the company in terms of the image of what the ideal
Right.
face of the company should look like. So
Right.
it's kind of a bit of a tough one.
Yeah. And just going off what you said, it's like they've in the old regime they created that image of
Yep.
the big guys always went over, the big guys always were the main title holders, and then the second tier guys were the intercontinental, the European champion, things of that sort. And they kept reverting. They gave you a little nibble like the Yes Movement, they gave you with that when Kofi Kingston had Kofi Mania. He obviously beat
Yep.
Daniel Bryan and got his WrestleMania moment, got his first WWE Championship. But then they reverted right back to it when they had Brock Lesnar squash him on a random SmackDown episode. So,
Yeah.
like, just say, like, to that regard, it kind of makes me feel like, okay, although they're in a new regime under Triple H, are they gonna revert back to that? And now this entire year is gonna be all about John Cena? Because like that's what
Yeah.
to me it's like you don't have John Cena come back. He's gonna have his last Royal Rumble tonight. He's gonna have his last Elimination Chamber, his last Mania. But like Prime John Cena didn't lose to anybody. Prime John Cena won everything. So unless they're setting up him to, because if they have him win tonight, it's literally the same old thing. Unless they're gonna
100%.
have him lose in his last Mania to like tip the cap to a Cody Rhodes. I just it's tough. It's tough to swallow as like a
Yeah.
life fan, you know. But
Yeah, but then as well, and this is where the rabbit hole goes deeper. It's like if John Cena wins, does it look fathomable or believable
right,
that he would face Cody Rhodes or Gunther? Like, does it make sense? Does it?
not only face
Especially with
them,
his
yeah,
yeah,
because I mean he
because
hasn't won a match anytime he has returned since becoming a movie star. But is it
exactly.
believable that A, he wins the Rumble, and then B, goes on to beat one of them when they've held the title since last Mania? So it's like
Yeah,
it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we're just reverting back to old regime, back to old Super
yeah,
Cena and all of that.
exactly.
Which is why I hope tonight at least they go a separate route and then build up Cena to eventually maybe get number 17 down the road throughout the year. But
Yeah, like SummerSlam could be like a
yeah,
very good SummerSlam, something like that. But yeah, it's I think that what they really need to do is like sort of have WrestleMania season start with the Rumble and like you know kind of have that 2 months between the Rumble and Mania be just utter chaos and just
yeah,
in terms of because like there was definitely been times when titles have changed in Elimination Chamber.
yep,
So then that's kind of set up an entirely new feud ahead of WrestleMania in that 6 week program.
yeah,
And like that's great. It doesn't necessarily not everything has to be as drawn out because all of the big storylines right now they're all a year plus, which is
no,
great.
yeah,
But at the same time, it's like that's overshadowing I think the rest of it. You know, the likes of like the New Day getting their 10 minutes of TV time, carrying Cross, things like that, just fantastic work. They're not the biggest names; they're just sort of good workers. It's
right.
Yeah. So I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still very excited for it.
Oh yeah, big time.
But it's I'm hoping for a swerve, hoping for just something.
Yeah.
An oh my god moment, as they call it.
Yeah, and I guess that's why you got to tune in to watch it and find out.
Hell yeah, man! Hell yeah.
But Andy, it has been a great episode. I've obviously enjoyed it. If before we sign off, if you could tell everybody out there where they can follow you, obviously give us the details on behind the camera so that everyone knows what your podcast is about, so that they have something else to listen to aside from console to console. Please, the floor is yours, and shoot away, my friend.
Of course, man. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been an amazing chat. So yeah, my name is AndyGames_94. I go by that on Twitch and TikTok. And I also, as Dean mentioned, have a podcast called Behind the Camera with Andy Games. You can find that on pretty much all streaming platforms, including YouTube as well. Similarly enough to this, it's an interview style based podcast where instead of talking about individual games, talk about the individual themselves behind the games, or behind the camera, as it were. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up, man. But yeah, once again, thank you so much for having me on today. It's been amazing making the console to console debut. It's been a long time coming. I've been very, very excited for this project to get off the ground, and I couldn't be happier for you with the way it has, man.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much, obviously, for being on, and it's been a pleasure as usual. But for everybody out there listening, everyone who has been part of the live recording today, that is our episode with AndyGames_94 for WWF Warzone. Our next episode will be later on this week with Super Mario Brothers 3. We have a very special guest lined up for that. But for everybody watching, we appreciate you being a part of all of it today, and hopefully you'll be listening on all platforms going forward. For Andy and myself, thank you guys very much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.